From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Venezuela's ambassador to the United Nations, Samuel Moncada, has heavily criticized the Organization of American States for recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaido's representative. Speaking at the UN Security Council, Moncada said it is illegal and a lie to do so. He also said humanitarian aid is needed in the country, but blamed the U.S., whose sanctions have strangled Venezuela's economy. Moncada further criticized U.S. officials in favor of increasing pressure on Venezuela through sanctions.
It is worth responding to someone who lied in saying that yesterday the region as a whole rejected the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in the Organization of American States. That is false. That is a lie. It is misinformation, a problem that perhaps he needs to address with his legal team. Yesterday, what happened in their thirst to promote a coup d'etat in Venezuela and impose a puppet government to uphold their interests, the U.S. interests in Venezuela, which would allow for the pillaging of our resources, then they ran roughshod over the founding charter of the OAS, which is commensurate with the Charter of the United Nations. And they twisted the law to such an extent that what was approved was not the expulsion of the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to the OAS. Rather, they approved and adopted the inclusion of a representative of the National Assembly of Venezuela. And this is absurd. It's a legal fiction.
After the Security Council meeting, Moncada gave a press conference where he criticized the Trump administration for pressuring Venezuelan diplomats in the U.S.
It happens now that our accounts, for our embassy accounts in the United States, are frozen. We cannot bring in money to pay our staff because the sanctions or the measures of extortion, the illegal measures of the United States, frighten the banks, and the banks don't want to touch Venezuelan money. It's not that there isn't any money, it's that they won't let them into these frightened banks.
One of the first to speak at the Security Council meeting was the United States Vice President Mike Pence, who demanded that the UN recognize the self-proclaimed opposition figure, Juan Guaido, as interim president. That is something the UN has repeatedly refused to do and was roundly criticized by Russia and China. The permanent Russian representative to the UN emphatically rejected United States interventionism in Venezuela. He stated that with one hand, the U.S. calls for humanitarian assistance, but with the other, steals from the Venezuelan people.
Reject the methods of the United States with regard to Venezuela. With the one hand, you're grabbing Venezuela by the throat by introducing still new sanctions and restrictions which prevent the country from developing normally. At the same time, international assistance that is required by states should be aimed at creating a situation where a state can take care of its own citizens. However, with the other hand, you are also picking the pockets of Venezuelans. You're shamelessly expropriating Venezuelan assets in Western banks. Just from the beginning of this year, you have taken some $30 billion from the country, claiming that only the self-proclaimed President Guaido can use those funds. The overall damage from the actions of the United States to the Venezuelan economy since 2013 can be calculated in hundreds of billions of dollars.
Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has also strongly criticized Pence's demands at the UN Security Council.
Today, the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, making a fool of himself in the United Nations Security Council. I cannot understand his arrogance, his self-importance, his racial supremacism. He thinks of himself as superior to us, to Latin Americans, to people from the Caribbean. He believes himself superior to Venezuelans.
And the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Peter Maurer, has said they are working with Venezuela to provide humanitarian support across the country. Maurer met with President Nicolás Maduro and other government officials. He also visited hospitals, social centers, military schools, and several neighborhoods in the capital, Caracas. In a press conference, he said the Red Cross is there to provide impartial and non-political humanitarian aid. He also announced the organization has increased its budget for Venezuela from $8 million to $24 million for 2019.
I have visited hospitals in Bolivar, in Táchira. I have visited migrant population at the border. I have seen what the ICRC, together with the Venezuelan Red Cross, is doing at bus stations in order to assist migrant populations. I have also, during the field visit, spoken to military commanders of the regional commands and the community defense commands, and I have spoken to the governor in Táchira State, of course. I have spoken to doctors, to nurses, to community workers. Whatever you call what we see, in the category of humanitarian work, we see that there are needs of people which we want to respond to. And we are not an institution, and we are not in a position at the present moment to have a comprehensive overview on where needs are. But we have decided that the capital region here, that the border region towards Colombia, and that Bolivar states are the three areas in which ICRC will first and foremost respond and have priority action.
Cuba has proclaimed its new constitution during a ceremony at the National Assembly in Havana. The new text will substitute the previous constitution of 1976. The revised articles were ratified on February 24th on a referendum and later approved by the National Assembly.
This constitution is relevant to these times, and it reflects the historical circumstances of our society and guides the changes made with a vision of the future, with the supreme objective of reaching a socialism which is every day more prosperous, sustainable, inclusive, and with the participation of all. With it, the revolutionary state is stronger, from which we demand transparency and respect for the law. It respects the right of women and men, and equality of all Cubans, without discrimination, and those are the pillars of our society. And just as Fidel Castro said on that first Congress of the party, and I quote, "Today we need a socialist constitution that goes along the characteristic of our society, with a social conscience, the ideological conviction, and the desires of our people, a constitution to have the general laws for the society we have built, with the profound economic, social, and political transformation made by the revolution and the historic achievement by our people. A constitution that consolidates what we are now and helps us achieve what we want to be tomorrow."
Castro also warned about the attempts of the U.S. to destroy the example of the Cuban Revolution and denounced the attacks against Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Bolivia.
The historic enemies of the revolution tried to question this, but it all falls after the massive support of our people. We have alerted about the aggressive action of the U.S. government against Latin America and the Caribbean. In name of the Monroe Doctrine, with an arrogant distance towards socialism, the freedom of its people, and the sovereign rights of the region.
Our correspondent, Elian Fernandez, brings us the details from Havana.
Cuba has proclaimed its new constitution that now has been published in the island state newspaper. The articles of this new constitution were debated by the citizens just before the referendum that approved the new legal document on February 24th. During its proclamation, the Secretary General of the Communist Party, Raúl Castro, said that Cubans have big challenges ahead, especially since the U.S. blockade is intensifying, intended to attack Cuba's economy. Castro added that this attack is the worst in 50 years. The Secretary General also ratified the commitment by the Cuban government and the Communist Party with Venezuela and the Bolivarian Revolution. saying that they have the right to self-determination despite the violent attacks to this Latin American nation that violate international law.
Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's main challenger, Benny Gantz, has conceded defeat in the country's general election. Netanyahu will stay in power for a fifth term with the support of religious and right-wing parties. With almost all votes counted, Netanyahu could form a 65-seat majority in parliament. However, he could be indicted in the upcoming months for 3 corruption cases.
We are not only going to the opposition, we are going to the Knesset to start the next round. I am declaring from here to the Likud, to Netanyahu, to the coalition, we will make your life hell.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has accepted the European Union's offer to delay the UK's departure from the bloc until October 31st. May had initially asked for a delay until June 30th, but this agreement was reached after 5 hours of talks at an emergency EU meeting in Brussels. The UK's Parliament has rejected May's Brexit deal 3 times, and her attempts to strike a compromise with the opposition have been unsuccessful. I'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Police officers have raided the house of Peru's former president, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. A judge initially ordered that Kuczynski be detained for 10 days in connection with a money laundering investigation. The former president was taken to a legal medicine unit after alleging he has a health condition that could prevent him from going into detention. 2 more people were also detained in the case. Kuczynski's lawyer has denied any wrongdoing.
This is obviously an abuse, because there is no proof that links our client with any act of corruption. The arguments of his defense have been heard in various hearings.
Our correspondent Jaime Herrera brings us more details.
We are outside of Pedro Pablo Kuczynski's home, where police forces have been deployed. Also inside, some police officers are raiding the place, along with officials from the public prosecutor's office. This detention order is aimed at transferring Pedro Pablo Kuczynski and 2 other people involved in the case to a police station to further deepen the investigation on corruption and money laundering regarding contracts for the building of public infrastructure. However, it has been reported that Kuczynski has said that he has a health condition at the moment and needs medical attention to determine if he can be transferred to a detention center. Some minutes ago, a police vehicle entered his house to take Kuczynski to the legal medicine unit. There he could stay up to 10 days until the prosecutor decides if an investigation will be opened against him.
We thank Jaime Herrera for that report. More news now. A new migrants caravan has set out from Honduras. Hundreds of people, including women and children, have started their journey north, hoping to reach the United States. They say they are seeking for a better life and a future. 53,000 migrants seeking asylum were detained at the U.S. southern border in March, according to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. This April 10th marks the 100th anniversary of the assassination of Mexican revolutionary Emiliano Zapata. Zapata is a leading figure of the Mexican Revolution. He was the main leader of the Campesino Revolution in the state of Morelos, where he has been tributed. He was killed in an ambush by government forces. Zapata's struggle for the right to land continues nowadays.
For us, it is a historical commemoration, 100 years marking the assassination of General Emiliano Zapata Salazar. And it is a day of sadness, and at the same time, of joy, because he is remembered with honor, and he left us a legacy of justice.
The House of Alba Cultural House in Bolivia has been inaugurated. This is the 3rd one that exists in the continent and opens a big space for art exhibitions. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has more.
The House of Alba Cultural House is based at the Ministry of Culture in a building just in front of the government palace in La Paz.
It gives us a way to make a worldwide appeal for unity, integration, sovereignty and dignity. This is why Alba was created. Thanks to this Community Solidarity Fund, we were able to create a political alternative which includes geopolitics and cultural base.
ALBA TCP, formerly called the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, People's Trade Treaty. It was created by Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and Cuban President Fidel Castro in 2004.
The ALBA organization has about 60 million people. We decided to form an intergovernmental organization based on the idea of social, political, and economic integration. We have a lot to accomplish, and as our commander Hugo Chavez said, it doesn't matter what we have done. What matters is what we are yet to do.
The House of ALBA, Culture House, is a 4-story building equipped with an auditorium, library, textile art rooms, and exhibition areas. It also has a Jose Marti Cafe, the Bolivarian Alliance salon and rehearsal spaces for dance and theatre enthusiasts.
It's not the best time for the Latin American community. Dark clouds are looming as entities are trying to control us. This is a huge mistake and a step backwards in history that threatens the entire continent. ALBA represents an alternative future of unity based on joy, creativity, and identity.
This is the third House of ALBA built in the continent. The other 2 are in Cuba and Venezuela. They serve as centres to promote the culture of member countries and other cultures across the globe. Almost all of its services are free, like the professional recording studio built in La Paz.
The Cayman Islands Court of Appeal has ruled in favor of the government, blocking the recent same-sex marriage ruling from taking effect. The appeal panel has held the modified marriage law's implementation until the government's appeal is completed. That appeal will be heard in August. The court's decision effectively stopped the same-sex couple who initially brought the landmark case before the court from getting married on Wednesday as planned. One person has died in St. Lucia from the H1N1 influenza, also known as swine flu. This was confirmed by the Trinidad-based Caribbean Public Health Agency. The Department of Health also investigating the deaths of 3 other men since swine flu has been confirmed in other people. Swine flu is the virus behind the 2009 influenza pandemic. Infected persons may get flu-like symptoms, while others may suffer severe respiratory problems.
Covering the mouth when sneezing or coughing.
St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris says there is no merit to claims that he is guilty of nepotism. The opposition and other critics have said several close relatives of Dr. Harris are in top positions in the judiciary, the banking sector, and other areas. While acknowledging that his family members do hold key positions in some of the areas mentioned, Dr. Harris says they had all been appointed under the previous administration. A Trinidad and Tobago-born man living in the U.S. has been accused of planning to drive a van into pedestrians at a shopping compound in Maryland. 28-year-old Rondell Henry stole a U-Haul truck with the intention of using it as a weapon. Although Henry faces no terrorism charges, court documents detail terror-related accusations and statements. The man has been charged with interstate transportation of a stolen vehicle and faces up to 10 years in prison if convicted. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The political party of former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila has recorded a landslide victory in the country's provincial governorship elections. The Common Front for Congo FCC coalition won 16 of the 22 seats. The results are likely to increase pressure on President Felix Tshisekedi, who has been struggling to assert his authority on the country's institutions. The FCC already won comfortable majorities in both houses of parliament, as well as provincial assemblies in the December 30th polls.
Now we have a governor of Kinshasa Province City. It's not just FCC. He will be a governor for all political parties and groups.
This April 10th marks 26 years since the killing of South Africa's anti-apartheid icon, Chris Hani. He was the Secretary General of the South African Communist Party and Chief of Staff for the African National Congress Armed Wing, Umkhonto we Swiss. He was assassinated outside his place in Johannesburg on April 10th, 1993, by right-wing politicians Cleve Lewis and Janusz Walutz. His death almost plunged the nation into a civil war as angry protests flared up.
No, this regime.
Dozens of farmers from Africa have protested outside the European Union Commission building in Belgium against what they are calling the dumping of milk from the European Union onto African markets. The protesters say the practice is not only robbing African farmers of the much-needed market, but it is also a danger to people's health as the milk is tainted with products such as palm oil. They add that if left unchecked, the practice will destroy the livelihoods of millions across Africa.
We've had enough seeing this exploitation by manufacturers through European exporters who bring milk to our country. But this milk is not the same that is used in Europe. This milk has been made richer with palm oil. And I think that in Africa we have enough problems not to have more public health issues added to them. And there is also dumping, because now the European policies with their subsidies, overproduction and many other things, that's dumping. I think African countries should not have to accept this exploitation.
The 6-day emergency cholera vaccination campaign has concluded in Mozambique. The successful campaign targeted around 900,000 people in 4 districts affected by Cyclone Idai, identified by the government as highest risk. This risk increased due to a lack of safe access to water and sanitation.
Cholera is endemic in this part of Mozambique, so when the cyclone hit, they knew that there was a very high risk of a cholera outbreak, that the population would be extremely vulnerable due to the damage to the water and sanitation systems. So the government of Mozambique put in a request to the International Coordinating Group, the ICG, that has a global stockpile of this vaccine, of oral cholera vaccine, for emergencies.
United Nations staff members in Ethiopia have participated in a remembrance ceremony for their colleagues who lost their lives when an Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 737 aircraft crashed last month. The ceremony was attended by members of staff for various UN agencies and relatives of the victims. The 21 employees of the UN were among the 157 people that died when Ethiopian Airlines flight number ET302 crashed a few minutes after taking off from Addis Ababa.
I wish we never had to mourn the loss of our colleagues and our friends. It is never a day that we wish for. Our colleagues, 33 of them, 21 from the UN and 12 from the NGO community, were men and women, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, husbands.
Marcelino, I learned so much from you. I want you to know how big a presence you had and continue to have in my heart. How much you touched the hearts of people who knew you. My thoughts of sorrow go to all of the other people on that plane.
Scientists, for the first time in human history, have managed to take a photo of a black hole using a global network of telescopes. The slightly blurred photo of the black hole at the center of a massive galaxy called Messier 87 was taken using data from 8 radio telescopes in 6 locations across the globe. The combined signals created a planet-sized telescope that could capture a glimpse of the black hole, which is about 54 million light years away from Earth. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.